Hello and welcome to Crate Expectations, the monthly podcast where four average record collectors and friends dig through their stash to share a tasty treat based on the topic of the day. I'm Tom Discogs Kennedy. I'm joined by Dan Beautiful Day Lozier, Matt Curator Carvalho, and Chris Canrock Palumbo. This is Crate Expectations. We are the Groovy Guys, and today we are talking about that foot-tapping, hip-shaking, head-bopping, fist-bumping feeling you get when you're listening to live music. And we're going to be sharing our favourite live albums from our collection. But before we dig into that, gents, we've just gone past Record Store Day. What goodies did you snap up?
Absolutely nothing on my end.
Good strong start to the podcast. Chris.
Same with me. I'm with Dan. I drove by the shop. The lineup was around the corner, and I was on a very tight deadline. And I got nothing. I sent an email and said, I can show up tomorrow. Please hold Rage Against the Machine for me. And they responded with no holds. If there's one here tomorrow, come get it. No luck.
Matty, what'd you get?
All right, I got Notorious B.I.G. Biggie Duets, which has been on my list for a while, so grab that. And the Arkells Jackson Square, which I was so happy to grab. Chris, I gotta give you all the props in the world for that, for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah, you got lucky on. That's from Dine Alone, right?
It is. It's the first thing I went after.
So I went on the Dine Alone site to get the Chats album. And I literally, at 11 o'clock or whenever it was going live, I was on my phone hitting refresh and I couldn't get through. And I was real upset.
It was like buying tickets to a concert. I had to hit refresh 100 times before it even became live. And then even getting to the finish line, it just felt really clunky. I was lucky enough to grab one.
Nice. Good
Matt,
for you.
Thanks, talk to us about the single that came with that. That's like
such a cool
a sheet of plastic. It's so weird.
I don't even know why I got this, but it must have been just part of Record Store Day. If you made a purchase, you got this little single. So it's essentially a little square 7-inch record. I've seen square 7-inch singles before. I have a couple. But what's so unique about this one is it's literally almost paper thin.
It's amazing.
Like I can bend
it's only one side. Right?
It's crazy. But the audio quality is so good. Sorry, what was that?
It's only one sided.
Only
right?
one sided.
But
it's really interesting.
To the listeners, it looks like a sheet of cellophane.
Super flimsy.
Like it's bending in your hand, but then you put it on the turntable and it creates music.
It's funny. It was actually kind of hard to get it off the turntable because the little hole in the center was so tight. I was like so careful to bring it off. I was like, I don't want to tear this thing. It's so thin.
And was it Arkells as well, or is it?
No, it is by. Hang on one second. Pull it back out here. It is the Drew Thomas Foundation. Or sorry, Drew Thompson Foundation.
Have you guys ever heard?
I've never heard of them.
The song's called "Stay."
Have you guys ever heard of records called ribs, like actual like body ribs?
Never.
Hey?
No.
These are Russian Soviet Union bootlegs that people used to make out of X-ray material.
Come on.
And what they would do is they would find records and they would make copies onto these X-rays, and they were bootlegs because at the time, the USSR, banned a lot of different music, right? But people would find X-rays, and they're called.
That's so cool.
It's colloquially called ribs, and they're pretty awesome. They're actually really collectible. But yeah, you should check it out. Like the cool thing about them though is that you have like a 7-inch, and there's like there's a X-ray of a hand, but with grooves and stuff on it, so it's really cool. Like I've always wanted to find something like that. Yeah,
I gotta get one of those.
And it just reminds me of your.
That's really cool.
Super thin record because they were really thin, really flimsy.
I'll check that out.
Chris, did you have something to say about that?
No, I'm good.
I also had no luck on Record Store Day. I wasn't around, so I wasn't able to dig. And similar to Chris, I sent a store a note about the Rage release and a reissue of the Swords' first album. Had no luck. but the vinyl universe works in mysterious ways. So I missed out on getting the Swords reissue. And then just earlier this week, I saw two of their second and third albums for sale from a guy I know. Picked them both up quite cheap. I think I sent you guys a message about it. They're like Texan hard rock. They're a pretty groovy band. Heavy, but a real groove to them as well. Really cool. I haven't given them a spin yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Nice.
Awesome. Hey, do you know what's really funny? Is you say the vinyl universe works in mysterious ways. The other day I said to Lee, keep on keeping on. And Lee's like, oh, that's a cool lyric. And I'm like, yeah, it's in Matt Mays' live album. And I Googled it. And it turns out I missed out on Curtis Mayfield my entire life. And I happened to walk into the record store a couple of days ago on Father's Day because I was like, the only thing I want to do on Father's Day is go to the record store. And this was just sitting there waiting for me. And I was like,
it's a killer album.
Yo, I can't believe everyone I told you guys, I was like, went to my mom and like, yo, do you like Curtis Mayfield? And she's like, yeah, he's amazing. I was like, how come I'm the last person to find out about this?
Dude, Matt, he's a beast of the civil rights movement as well.
Yeah, I know the name sounded familiar in that aspect, but yeah, didn't know. And then I put on the songs. I was like, oh, this sounds familiar. Lots of movie soundtracks came to mind.
Yeah,
but man, super cool. It's bright orange, the record itself. It's got a calendar. Awesome.
And it's Roots.
Really cool.
So I don't think
Roots,
you mentioned the album.
Roots,
yeah.
I think he's got a couple of albums on like best 500 albums of all time, I believe.
I can
He would
easily
have
see
for
it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a reissue. I was kind of sad. I was looking for an original, and I talked to Paul at Looney Tunes, and he just was like, "Yeah, good luck if they come in. I already have a list of people who want them."
And
he's
expensive.
like, yeah, and he's like, "But I'll keep an eye out," and he emails me. So yeah, it's all good. Super stoked about that.
Nice one, Chris. Well, today we are talking about our favourite live albums from our collection. Something that you just can't recreate that experience of seeing a band live, but there's some pretty epic albums out there which capture that mood. Matt, we'll start with you, sitting there in your state library collection of musical records. What have you got for us?
All right, so I'm going with Green Day's Bullet in a Bible. I don't know if you guys have listened to this or seen the live DVD that comes with this. Oh, it is just top notch. It's one of my favorite live DVDs. These guys' lives are just a ton of fun. I've seen them, I think, 3 or 4 times now live in concert, and one of the best shows you can go to. Great value. They put on a hell of a show. It's everything you expect, pretty much whatever album they're touring with, and their classic hits. You can't go wrong. So this one, they are touring with American Idiot, and it's at Milton Keynes in England, and it's filmed over 2 days. It's just amazing. It's so much fun. You could hear the energy from the crowd throughout this. Like, it's incredible.
Is it a box set?
No. So the CD version came with the DVD, and this one is just the record.
Oh, how many? Sorry, it looked chunky.
How many people in the crowd there?
65,000. So 130 over 2 days.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Holy.
So in the DVD, they explain when they put the tickets up on sale, they were kind of worried like how long everything would take to sell. And they sold out, I think they said, in like 1 or 2 days, and then put the second day out and sold out even quicker.
What year was that? Just out of curiosity.
Let me see here. Sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
It must have been like
So this
2004,
is a
2005,
reissue, I
right?
think. Yeah, I think it's 2005.
Okay, all right.
I mean,
so
this
is
was
like,
yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
this was like a pre-internet buying, where like, so I guess it would be probably half you bought tickets on the internet, and then half the people were lining up for tickets.
Yeah,
so
I would say it's probably accurate.
that's impressive when you think about like how many people showed up to this concert.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, like 65,000 capacity. That's like it's. I mean, I guess what that stadium was like a football pitch or something like that.
Pretty much, it's a big open green field.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
And what's cool about that album too, I mean, because I guess they were playing American Idiot, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was like a time when they had gone from like, you know, kids in a punk band to like big time stadium punk.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, you didn't really see a lot of stadium punk, right? Maybe Blink-182, but like this is different.
And that's like a rock opera, right? Concept album. Throwback.
Yeah, absolutely. The stage setup is so cool too. It's this big platform that goes out into the middle of the crowd because Billy's all about crowd interaction. There's 2 long platforms that go out to the side of each stage, so they can run back and forth, him and Mike, and just have a ball with the crowd. And then the pyrotechnics in this is just amazing. Like even on the CD, you can hear the crowd, how into it the crowd is. It's fantastic.
So I was gonna say that you shared this, and I'm an early Green Day fan. I didn't get big into American Idiot because I thought they sold out, but that was like me being a teenager and trying to rebel for no reason. But like you can hear this like on the Spotify. I don't have the album, but on the Spotify playlist, you can hear how into it the crowd is.
Oh yeah.
And I was shocked. Like, so you describing the way and I didn't know that's the way the stage was, but you can definitely hear when he moves out into the crowd, you can hear that in the song. And that's it's a really cool part of it. And now that I learned how the stage was set up and it was done on purpose, that seems like such a great way to do a live album.
For sure.
There's so many reasons why listening to live music and experiencing music live are, you know, it's something that we're drawn to and that we gravitate toward. But that feeling of being among a huge crowd like that, like there's something exciting about being in an intimate show, and there's something exciting about being one of 65,000 people that are all participating in the same experience. Or like I get goosebumps thinking about going to gigs like that, and just all singing as one, all moving as one, all experiencing that moment in time as one. It's such an amazing part of live music.
Absolutely. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Both two very different, two different experiences, both very unique. You can't really beat that. And
I love it, man.
Oh, absolutely. So I have kind of a fun story to kind of link up with this. So Wedding Day, I was listening to this album all up towards when all the events were taking place. And the last song I listened to was King for a Day / Shout. And another cool, this is kind of just its own independent story because as I mentioned, I've seen Green Day a few times. So summer 2010, saw them in Toronto at the amphitheater, and me and a buddy of mine were going up, and we were just kind of messing around with each other. We're like, because like again, they're all about fan interaction and stuff, and every once in a while they invite people up on stage. I was like, what would you do if you got up on stage? And he's like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know. I have no idea what I would do. So we're there. They decided to play, I can't remember if it was the entire album of Dookie, but it was a large portion of it. And at one point, I believe they were playing FOD. Billy screams, I want to see all your fucking asses on stage right now. And they open the side, and me and my buddy run up. We're one of maybe 30 people on stage. I'm getting goosebumps telling this story.
Wow.
My buddy runs up to Billy, kisses him on the cheek. And I had kind of a cool interaction with Trey Cool. And then I jumped up on one of the speakers, and my buddy was right beside him. We started going, hey, hey, hey. And the crowd started doing it too.
That's amazing.
The craziest thing that's ever happened to me at a show.
Oh, that's hard to top right there.
Should we just wrap the app?
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
It was so crazy because we got a text at the end of the night from a random friend we didn't even know was there. They're like, I saw you guys on stage. I was in the lawn seats. And I was like, oh, holy shit, that's crazy.
That's awesome.
But do you know what? Like that's that says so much about the band. They get it. They get the relationship with their fans, and it's part of the experience for them too. They want to have a connection with their fans.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've seen so many clips on YouTube of Billy giving out his guitar to fans and stuff, right?
That's
come play the riff. Which riff do you know? Yeah, which riff do you know? Let's play a song with you.
Yeah,
he does it with kids too. It's awesome. Oh,
it's so cool. I even got my Green Day shirt that I was wearing at that show when that happened on.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
And it's an American flag mask. How fitting for the times we're in.
Shout out to Billy, Mike, and Trey. If you guys can just jump on the podcast and just talk about that time that Matt was on stage with you, that'd be great.
They probably are not going to remember that, but I'd be up for a conversation for sure.
That's a great story, man. That's really hard to top right there. Straight up.
That was a wild story.
It's all gonna be downhill from here.
Nah.
Matt, from that album, as our listeners may know, we curate a playlist for every episode. We put the whole album that was chosen on there so everyone can have a listen to it. But from your perspective, what would be the most popular and your favorite tracks from that album?
Okay, if I'm going with popular, I'm going to have to go with Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. That's what ends the concert. That version of the song and just the energy from Billy and the crowd, you can't touch it. It's incredible. And then my personal favorite is King for a Day and Shout, because they mix in the Isley Brothers Shout, and it just becomes so much fun. Just a lot of hey.
Nice. Yeah. That's cool.
So cool. Man.
It is a good one. Yeah. I do like that live version.
Yeah, it's so good.
Okay, from the archive room at the Carvalho house to the kitchen at the Palumbo house, Chris, what have you got to share with us today?
I've got a band I didn't think I liked at all. I didn't even think I knew who they were. So going back to the beginning of the pandemic.
You too. Sorry.
Going back to the beginning of the pandemic, I got not laid off from work, but all the schools closed. So I had nothing else to do. My wife was working in the kitchen and I just had to do quiet things around the house because we live in a tiny condo. So I decided to go through my record collection and I came across this Cheap Trick album. And I was like, okay, put it on, because I was just getting rid of albums that I didn't like. And so I put this thing on, and I remember starting it quietly because she was in a meeting. So I was just in the other room with it on quietly. And I just found myself going back and turning up the knob. Right. And then all of a sudden they'd be like yelling about, because she was in a meeting. And I was like, holy cow. And I just threw it to the side. She finished work and I was making dinner and I put it back on and I just cranked it. And I was like, this album is amazing. So this is Cheap Trick live at
Budokan, is it?
Budokan. I always pronounce it wrong. I always say Budokan. And oh man, does this album just kill. And this album made me go down a rabbit hole of Cheap Trick, which I have to say, this is by far their best album, which made me do a ton of research to be like, what
to go
happened?
Back to the start.
Like, no wonder I haven't heard of them.
You gotta love it when a live album like actually gets you to listen to someone.
Okay.
That's the one that made them big too.
Yes, so that's the story. This is what made this album so unique, because I had about 5 other albums I wanted to pick, and it was like, no, this one jumped out because they weren't big. They weren't big in North America. They were big in Japan. For some reason, they were big in Japan, and they jumped on that bandwagon, and they saw their opportunity, and they're like, we're going to do a live album with fans that actually want us to be there, which is like one of those things where Canadian bands run into it all the time. They go across the border to the States, and they play to a crowd that's like into it a little bit, and then they come back to Canada, and they're like, oh my God, it's so nice to have a crowd that's like singing along and screaming. So these guys played that card perfectly. They recorded this live album with their songs that had been out for, some of them had been out for a couple years. I think 2 of them were like newer songs, but mostly they the energy in the crowd is what brings this album to life. It's sort of like what Matt was talking about. And there's only, I do believe, like 12,000 people in the crowd.
Yep, but isn't that what that's what makes a live show great, right? It's the energy of the crowd. I've been to shows where I thought the band was doing a great job, but maybe people just weren't into that band. Like, you know, sometimes when you go to see an artist, you bought a ticket for the headliner, but then the opening act you thought was great, but everyone's just standing around talking, and it completely kills it, even though you think that they're great.
Yeah.
You know, but then
I agree.
If you have those opening acts where people are just completely stunned and then everyone's into it and they're cheering, it just, you know, it elevates the experience, right?
Yeah, I find that an issue with Torontonians. They're there for the headliner and they don't care about anything else. But then you go towards London or Oshawa, for some reason, has great crowds.
Yeah, people treat concerts too much as like a place to go meet your friends as opposed to going to see a show.
Yes.
Yeah,
shut up and watch the act.
Yeah,
100%. Have you guys ever seen the reverse of that happen, though, where more people are there to see the opener than they are the headliner? I've had that experience happen once.
It was
what was the band?
Against Me was opening for Silver Sun Pickups in Toronto. And It's crazy. I thought, you know, this was kind of when Silver Sun Pickups were getting big. And I can't believe how many people were there were just to see Against Me. Like, a good portion of the crowd left after, which I thought was just so disrespectful. Like, you guys, you paid $50-$60 to see the show. Why not stick around for the whole thing?
Leash and I, if we go and see a band, we try and get there to see the openings as well, because it's that rabbit hole, right? If they've chosen the support act because they think that the crowd that's coming to see the headliner will vibe with them, then maybe we're going to discover a new artist. And we did that twice. We went and saw Ben Harper and the Innocent Criminals here in Brisbane, and there was this epic opening act called Pierce Brothers, a duo, two brothers, and just this crazy energy, just two guitars. Like between them, they both play guitar, they both play percussion, didgeridoo. Like they're just this epic maelstrom, awesome energy live. So then next time they toured at just doing tiny shows, we went and saw them, and the guys supporting them were Little Georgia, which was that sort of country duo that I shared with you guys when we did the month final challenge. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's how you discover new music.
Yeah, for sure. It's a shame people do that.
Yeah, I agree.
And Chris, I was reading up on that Cheap Trick. I was actually listening to it this morning. It's amazing that the sections where the crowd is so animated that you can't actually hear the music properly because the crowd's making so much noise.
Okay, so what makes this even more interesting is when I was doing some research, did some research last year. I redid it today just to make sure I was a little prepared for this. But it's rumored that this wasn't actually recorded at Bo-Katan. This is recorded in Osaka. So it's an even smaller venue. So it was saying that I think they said it was 60,000 people it was recorded in front of, but it was actually like 12,000. Don't quote.
Wow.
I need to double check that. I didn't write the numbers down. I should have. But it was a smaller venue, which makes it even more kind of intimate, but it sounds like a giant stadium. Like you're saying, like
they're so into it.
They're so like the first time I talked about this album with you guys, I was like trying to record my speakers and Dan got mad at me because he's like, I can just listen on Spotify. I'm like, but you can't, like, it doesn't do it justice. You need it coming out of like you can't have it turned down. It needs to be, and you can hear the crowd. And it's really funny because if you look at some of the quotes and some of the newspaper articles from the time, they had their Beatlemania moment in Japan. Like they were compared, that's how big Cheap Trick was in Japan. Like
that's crazy.
Oh, wow.
Definitely on a smaller scale, but they were like, when their airplane landed to do the show, people were throwing flowers at the airplane. Like, yeah, wow. Like people were losing their minds in Japan. And it was just like, no one cared about them in North America. They'd put out albums before and no one cared. So it's until this album came out, and then you feel that passion. And I think that's really important about this is the crowd itself sells this album.
So the thing about that though is, this is the album that made them big. It's also their most popular album. It wasn't until, I was reading about this, it wasn't until they like sold 30,000 import copies in the US that they started actually distributing it in the US because it was so popular in Japan. It was only being produced there, but everyone in the US was buying copies of it.
Yeah, it was because radio started picking up on it, and they were importing it. I do believe in Canada it got a little. It was popular before the US as well. They had like a little Canadian run, and then it trickled down as well. But yeah, like that's crazy to think about. They didn't even think it was going to sell because sales of their records were not doing well in the country, and they saw an opportunity in Japan and they took it. And I think that's what makes this album kind of so special and why it did so well. Because people felt that it was a special moment kind of in musical time.
And they know how to do fandom in Japan. Like when they are fanatical about things when they really get into them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the story behind this, Chris. The version, it surrenders on this one, right? Correct? Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure my favorite live version is off that album. And whenever I hear it, it always reminds me of the movie Detroit Rock City. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I love that movie. It's so much fun. And it coincidentally, it's about going to see their favorite live band, Kiss.
It's a great movie.
That's awesome.
It's a great movie. Yeah. I haven't seen that in years.
I haven't. Oh, yeah, it's been way too long. Good callback on that one.
Yeah, so here's some interesting Billboard positions.
Go ahead, Dan.
In Canada. It went number 1 in Canada.
Yep.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I don't think Japan has the Billboard charts because I have nothing here. Or maybe it didn't have it at the time because the 2017 reissue only made it to 106 on the charts.
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think, what's interesting, Chris, is that you mentioned that they became really popular in Canada and, they were number 1 on the charts here.
Cool.
Interesting. Yeah. So
did not know that.
Chris, what would be off that album, what would you say is the most popular and your favorite jam?
So most popular is I Want You to Want Me. That actually, I think, singled.
Yep.
Great track.
Yeah, that wasn't one of their new songs on it. It'd been out for a while. I think 2 or 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then my favorite is I love the song Good Night. So they wrote this as an answer to Hello There, so they designed it to start the show with Hello There to like welcome the crowd in and get everyone fired up. And then they closed it with Good Night.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's like these gimmicky songs. And don't get me wrong.
The bookends.
Cheap Trick is a gimmicky band. Like you can hear it, but they do it so well. Which is, again, another reason why I think the live album helped them sell albums because they're a live band. But it didn't work as a end show because it got people too fired up. So then they would have to then come out and play and do an encore because it's such a good song. My favorite by far is Good Night. And yeah, it's just a great song. Definitely, if you haven't listened to this Cheap Trick album, you probably know all the songs on it. Like I found myself singing along and I didn't even know I liked Cheap Trick. And you're just like, yeah, take a listen.
They're just like, they're playful pop rock, and they're there for a good time. There's nothing wrong with that.
And you can tell by especially the pictures on the album, and it's great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like it's one of those bands that you didn't know you liked until you actually hear the songs. Like, oh, that's a Cheap Trick song. I had no idea. What's interesting, like it's only a 10 song set.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, so this isn't like we're a big popular band, we're putting out a live album. This is like, this is just a regular concert set. We're putting out a live record based on that.
Mm-hmm. It's a short album too. It's short, like 40 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they cut anything because, like I said, they actually took the recording from Osaka because the original one they tried just failed miserably. Supposedly the audio was garbage. I think it had something to do with the way the fans were interacting. It was just, they couldn't use it. So they had to re-record it another time. So interesting. Just an interesting album when you start diving into kind of the things behind it, the behind the scenes sort of side of live albums, which is kind of interesting.
What do you guys think of bootlegs? Do you have much experience with them?
I got a couple. I like them.
What's the quality like on them?
Pretty decent. Some are really, really good, and others it sounds worse than like your bad MP3. You know what I mean? Like some of it is really, really shoddy.
What do you got, Matt? Just a.
I've got a couple Eminem bootlegs. I have one Kanye. The Kanye one is one that there's some songs that sound decent, but some of it sounds like someone's holding their cell phone up to a recorder. It just sounds awful.
They probably are. Yeah.
Is the one of Eminem captured from your basement where you have him held captive?
The song "Stan" is written about Matt.
Oh, I used to get that a lot in high school. No, it's not.
Thank you for clarifying. I have a couple of Zeppelin bootlegs. The market tanked for some reason on like Zeppelin bootlegs used to be some of them really collectible and quite expensive, and then a few years ago Discogs banned the sale of boots. Because they're not authorized releases, and Discogs is a big organization. I presume it opens them up to legal disputes. So the market just tanked in terms of the price of bootlegs. So I picked up like a dozen Zeppelin albums from a guy a couple of years ago for super cheap, just out of interest. And I kept a couple of them because the sound quality was great. It was like you were just sitting at a small Zeppelin show back in the 70s.
I feel like
very cool.
I feel like bootlegs used to be an art, right? They'd smuggle in or have definitely. It like backstage, the reel to reel or whatever they used to do. Where nowadays, people try to take in like small digital recording devices.
Yeah, there's a couple of labels that they are bootleg labels. Like the Swinging Pig is. Trademark Standard Equality, I think, is quite a well-known boot label. And like certain bands, like the Grateful Dead, that's a part of their community is bootlegging and sharing, because the live experience is how you're supposed to experience the Dead.
For sure. Alina's dad was an audio engineer back in the 90s, and when he used to set up shows, he used to just basically put an 8-track recorder right there, and he has crazy amount of bootleg tapes from a very, very popular Canadian band that we won't mention. So,
that'd be really cool. Can we have a listening party one of these days?
We will. Yeah. Well, one day he says he's going to do something with it. I doubt he's going to. But.
Okay. Well, can you smuggle it out at one dinner and then we'll do something with it?
I've begged him, like, listen, man, just give him to me. I'll do something with it.
That'd be really cool.
Don't do anything with him other than just listen.
I want to listen.
Just chuck it on a tape and put it in the post to us, old school styles.
I'll put him on an X-ray.
I was going to say, so it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually going to bring that up. That's really interesting to hear. I would love to hear some of that. I think, doesn't Hendrix also have a bunch of bootlegs out there as well?
I don't know. I'm sure.
I don't
all
know,
the big bands
but
do.
I'm sure there are.
I feel like he would.
Yeah, but
because you mentioned
you might always be thinking there's a lot of posthumous releases from Hendrix that are of varying quality, and some were approved by the estate and some weren't.
Okay. I thought it was kind of like what you mentioned with the Grateful Dead. It was kind of part of that community and stuff like that. I could be wrong.
I'm sure it would be. Imagine getting a mixtape from your friend of Hendrix live stuff back in the day. That'd be so cool.
Be the best thing ever.
I'm sure like all the big bands, right? Like they put a lot of faith into other people to set up the audio equipment, right? And all you really have to do is from one output, toss in an 8-track recorder. Next thing you know, you got a whole concert on 8-track, right?
Yeah.
It is a cool concept.
I don't like the idea of someone profiting from it, but I like the idea of sharing. Not every gig ends up being a live album, but a lot of gigs that don't end up being live albums are amazing experiences. So the idea of sharing that experience more widely among the community of fans is cool.
Well,
apparently Jimmy Page is a big fan of Zeppelin boots.
I heard that.
You never know when a concert's going to be great, right? Mm-hmm. And you could go into a live recording and say, this is the one that we're going to record. We're going to put our best foot forward and break a leg. turns out like shit because you're trying too hard, right? But then there's that one show where you don't even know you're being recorded. Turns out to be the best live show you ever did.
And you're just vibing.
It's cool. I don't know if you guys know this. So the Chili Peppers, when they were touring back in 2011 with I'm With You, they were doing live recordings. And after the show, you could download, I think it was 1 or 2 live tracks that were recorded at the show you went to.
That's cool. That's really cool.
That's really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, I did the same thing. Bonnaroo tried that. It failed miserably through like an app. But yeah, the new digital age, I feel, loses that bootleg feel.
I agree.
But
it's not the same.
There we go.
It's not like, I don't think, if you're recording it on your phone and then just like WhatsApping it to your friends, it's not the same.
Yeah, not at all.
All right. Well, I'm going to change tack a little bit. Something that's quite unusual for me. I'm going to share some Australian music with you.
No, who would have guessed?
There we go.
Shock horror, right? So I'm digging back to the 80s for my choice of my favourite live album in my collection. This one is Hunters and Collectors, The Way to Go Out. This was recorded in a small venue in Melbourne in 1984. Hunters and Collectors, they were huge in the Australian music scene in the 80s. They've still got some radio standards today, and Mark Seymour, their frontman, still does a lot, performs a lot, but their heyday was really the 80s and early 90s. They're probably the easiest way to describe them. They're like art rock. Probably the easiest way to describe them to someone who's not familiar is they're like Talking Heads. But they're really cool. I think that a live experience of them is quite different to an album experience of theirs, because they were a big band. Like on this they had bass, keys, drums, trumpet, guitar, French horn, trombone, organ.
Oh my God.
So like a big band on stage. They've got that art rock vibe. So there's a little bit of jam, there's a little bit of jazz, and they're a really funky, cool experience. The reason this is my dad's favorite live album too. I think he has it in every medium, or most mediums. Like he has it on cassette, he has it on CD, he has it on DVD,
Laserdisc?
and he has it on vinyl.
Does he have it on Laserdisc?
He doesn't have it on Laserdisc or 8-track, but for some reason he needs it in all these different formats. I've just got it on vinyl, but from a listening experience, I think it was recorded at Earl's Court, which doesn't exist anymore. Sadly, I think was knocked down and is now the site of a retirement home. But
iconic venue.
It was like a small live music venue in Melbourne, like maybe 1,500 people, and you get that feeling when you're listening to it. Like Mark Seymour, the frontman, is engaging with the audience. He's talking to them, but you feel, if you sit down and listen to it, you can feel like you're in this intimate little gig with this band that's just trying things and just creating a really cool vibe. Like the crowd are singing along to some stuff. They're laughing at some of the jokes. It's just it's got a really cool vibe. And the sleeve itself has what looks like a bunch of photos from touring days, like would have been taken on a film camera.
I love that.
Just of the band on tour. I love this. The one in the top corner, it's like a fish and chip shop with a big, one of those big, tacky, like, I don't know, styrofoam or something, or fiberglass probably, fish. But they're a really cool band, really great live experience. I don't know if they'd be particularly well known outside of Australia. I was reading that they were a bit in Europe in the 80s, just probably because of those Talking Heads comparisons. Their most popular song is not on this album, is Holy Grail, which if you heard, you might be familiar with. But what I love about this is it's not really their big hits. It's deep cuts.
That's cool.
Very cool.
It's like I would imagine them being such a big band. There's like a lot of jamming going on in between songs where they're just grooving, they're vibing, and they're just like next thing you know, the solo is going on for way too long, but it's working, so nobody wants to stop it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's like the album version of a song is shorter because there's that section in the middle where they're just having a good time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I listened to this. It caught my eye, and I put them on a couple times in the car driving home, and I was unsure until the saxophone kicked in. And you mentioned it earlier. And as soon as the saxophone kicked in, I was like, you hear that 80s saxophone vibe? And I was like, okay, I like this. This is very, I didn't get the Talking Heads. I got like a Colin James, which may be like kind of a Canadian reference. I know Lozier's giving me like a weird look. But I don't know, like this Colin James vibe, and that could just be
like swing blues.
Yeah, I know, but the way the saxophone works with the rock, it went really well, and I was like, okay. I was sitting on the fence, and then that just won me over, and I'm not a saxophone guy, but I was like, this saxophone works well in this song, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I was like, good stuff, good combination of that like 80s rock and sax.
The brass definitely makes it, and there's minimal synth, which I also enjoy.
Yeah, I love the sax at a live show. There's not much that can beat it. Dan, I like that you mentioned, a groove and a vibe that goes on between musicians at a live show. I don't think there's anything that's more unique and special to see on stage than in between songs. There's an understanding between musicians, like a head nod, a gesture, and everyone understands what's coming and what we're going to do next. It's so cool and unique.
What's even more impressive is that there's such a large ensemble, right? And when you have to orchestrate not only like a 4-piece band, but also brass as well, and to be able to groove like that, and it's a special relationship with musicians, right? When you can look at each other across and be like, you just do that head nod, and all of a sudden they know to jump in, and it's having that is really special, and it makes for really special moments, right? And I think that's a big reason why people love to tour with the Grateful Dead, right? Like they're known to be jam rockers, Fish, right? Like same deal.
That's another one, yeah.
Their songs drag on for 25 minutes because they're just grooving and they're vibing on stage. And obviously, with a lot of the things that people are doing at those shows, that's exactly what you want to hear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other thing that really stands out, Chris, I'm sure when you were listening to this, is the bass is just so prominent. It's like a leading role in so many of these songs, just this real kind of chunky, funky, driving bass lines. They're pretty cool. I think they're pretty unique, and I wouldn't say that the music on this album would be considered popular music. It's a bit out there. I mean, it's art rock, right? But Mark Seymour as a frontman and vocalist, who still, as I said, is active in the Australian music scene. Like he's just an amazing storyteller and poet, and they capture a really cool. It's a very 80s album.
It is 80s, but it's almost not at the same time. You're right. It's like a heavy bass line. They tend to focus, from what I got anyway. They have the 80s elements in them, but they stayed away from like that cheesy 80s vibe that we know, right? Which I'm slowly starting to learn. If you look beyond popular 80s music, there's a bunch of these, like not underground, because they're not. They're like popular in their own little niches, I guess. But yeah, the chunky bass lines, the saxophone that's kind of like jazzy blues, right? That goes really well with like the singer's vocals. I think not that it was ahead of its time, because again, I wasn't in that moment, but when I was listening to it, I got 80s vibes, but at the same time I got like something kind of removed from the 80s. It kind of fits other places. It didn't feel like I was listening to a cheesy 80s song while I was driving, even though
Chris, I'm sure you made a really great point, but we didn't hear it. We can see you. We can't hear you, buddy.
This is fucking annoying.
All right, there we go.
You're back.
Go again.
I was in the.
So make that whole
No,
point again.
it doesn't matter. I lost it.
It does for
It does. You
continuity
gotta do it, man.
purposes.
Where did I stop? Can we just do next week? I'll just be Chris internet connectivity issues Palumbo, and then there'll just be a blank section.
You know what though, Chris? I think your point was probably recorded on your native recording.
Oh, that's true. It should be. But then I
but
swear, and I can't
you're gonna
remember.
have a big fuck.
Yeah, that's okay. God damn it.
So I don't know how you guys feel. I don't mind a good synth every once in a while, and I know they're very prominent in the 80s. You know what? I know we talk about the 70s being like that golden age for rock and roll. I do feel like there's a large portion of 80s music that was really underappreciated for its time. I find myself a lot nowadays going back to 80s. There's something about it that I really like. I don't know if it's the sound, the feel. And if you look at a lot of what's going on TV and stuff like that, a lot of big shows or big movies from the 80s are being redone
back to the 80s.
or resurrected in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? So I do feel I feel like the 80s get a little bit of a bad rap.
Oh, look, it's the same with any era, right? There's good and bad. There's a lot of great rock coming out of the 80s, like you said, and a lot of it was in reaction. You know, that the rock scene just goes like it reacts to itself, right? Mm-hmm. You had, punk rock was a reaction to rock operas, etc.
Yeah, but the problem is, I think, is that because we didn't grow up in that era, our first introduction to 80s music is whatever was on the top 40, right?
That's
and
fair.
If you're not going to spend your time actually looking into that era for other genres of music, you're going to be stuck with Flock and Seagulls and Guns N' Roses.
There's
right?
always times for Flock
You
of
got to
Seagulls.
dig a little deeper.
Seagulls.
Yeah.
Oh, the hair, Flock of Seagulls hair, iconic. Love it. Big fan.
It's not bad, but it's like honestly, like hate or love top 40. It's manufactured music and it sounds good because they figured out a formula, especially around that time, right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's not my taste. It's not something I'm going to listen to today, but it's like I thought the heyday for punk was the 90s. There's a ton of great punk music in the 80s. You got a rebuttal
Chris?
for that, Chris?
No, I was I was going to go lower. You can go 60s, 70s.
I was going to go 70s, man.
lower.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
sure, but you keep going to every genre, right? But it's the thing, right? Like you think 90s punk because that's when it got its first commercial success.
Yeah.
And then you keep diving in, you're like, oh, punk music originated in the 60s. This is crazy.
Yeah, which is why I jump on the train again, which is when I said earlier, like I was rebelling against Green Day because I was like, they sold out, right? Because they went mainstream and all that. And that, like, everyone sold out in the 90s and 2000s. It was just like, I was a fan of Goldfinger then, and they sold out.
Yeah, I was too.
Yeah, but they sold out just as hard. They were in Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like a video game. So I don't know why I was more critical to, Green Day over Goldfinger because of the success or whatever. But yeah, I think
so.
Because
here's a quick question. Do you think they added themselves to that soundtrack because at the time that's when a lot of downloads and there wasn't a lot of music being bought? I mean, there was, but not everything was super popular going platinum. That could have been a way to bring in income for the band.
Probably, which I would.
It is a bit. I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, which I would have called selling out back then. But I was a teenager, like.
Yeah, but a lot of the music in those video games were actually music that those skaters were actually listening to,
and it was
that's
good
why
shit
they
too.
got in there.
It was really good shit. Those
and it was really good
soundtracks
shit.
are so good.
Tony Hawk 2.
And none of that music you had ever heard before, and Tony Hawk was bringing it to light. And it's like, I don't think any of those guys sold out. I think people who got onto Tony Hawk Pro Skaters, I don't think they knew what kind of commercial success it was going to be.
No,
maybe in Tony Hawk 3 or 4.
And commercial success doesn't automatically mean that you're selling out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're reaching a bigger audience, like you said, they're just choosing a medium. If their medium is video games to get people exposed to their music, then so be it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. There's so many bands on those soundtracks. There's a couple songs I recognize, but I was like, oh my God, the vast majority of this is brand new and it's fantastic.
Yeah, great.
So circling back.
I was going to say, we got completely sidetracked.
I love our tangents. For me, the most popular song on this album is comfortably Throw Your Arms Around Me. As I said, the most popular song they've ever had is Holy Grail. It's not on this album. But Throw Your Arms Around Me, this live version's a lot different to the studio version, but I would check that song out. I would check Holy Grail out. If you enjoyed this live album, I would listen to Human Frailty, which is probably their best album, and it's awesome. These guys are a great band. So that's the most popular. My favourite off this is a track called The Slab. A slab is like a case of beer, like a 2-4. But that's not at all what this song is about. I was reading the liner notes from one of their best ofs, and this is the description of the track The Slab. And if you listen to the song and you listen to the lyrics, you don't actually need to research what it's about. But the description is drinking, oral sex fantasy, John Archer's strident bass run. And it's got a really, really funky bass kicking it off. But yeah, have a listen to that one. It's a fun time.
Cool, man.
The one I liked was I Believe, Tom. That's the one where the saxophone kicks in, and I was like, yes, that's what won me over. I can't remember what the first song I listened to, but I was like, on the fence. But then I Believe came in, and I was like, yes, okay.
So that's not a great sign for your enjoyment of the band, though, because that's actually a Ray Charles cover.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah.
My bad.
But
Sorry.
It's got a great. It's got one of my favorite lines in a song though. It says, "Last night you were dreaming, and I heard you say, 'Oh, Johnny, when you know my name is Ray.'" It's such a. The whole crowd just starts laughing because they know that that's the line.
That's fun.
Amazing.
Love it. Good stuff, Tom.
Bringing it home with the baseball cap and the cat feeder in the background. Mr. Lozier, what do you got for us?
Maybe we'll get an appearance from Bowie, the cat who was eaten from that feeder. Okay, so what I'm going with is album from probably one of my favorite musicians. Definitely a very inspiring, to me, singer-songwriter. We're going to go with Neil Young's Live at Massey Hall, 1971. This has to be
Chef Kiss.
This has to be
so good.
My most played record in my whole collection.
Wow.
This thing hardly ever sits in the pile. It always usually is right next to the record player. It's also probably the record I have spent the most on, and thankfully is my most valuable. This is actually a first pressing of this.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to say about this. I mean, Massey Hall, it's got to be one of the most iconic venues in Toronto. A lot of my favorite shows I've seen have been at Massey Hall. Now that it's been revamped and reopened, I'm excited to go back. I almost grabbed tickets to a Broken Social Scene concert in December, but that sold out in like 10 minutes.
Wow. I didn't even know they were coming.
I missed the boat on that one. If Neil Young ever plays there again, I will
I'll fly to Canada.
I will spend any amount of money to see that show.
Yeah, I'm going.
And if it's sold out by the time I get it, I will kill people for a ticket.
Whoa!
Just kidding. I think the beauty of this record is that, he came Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and was really coming into his zone, right? The thing I love about this, that it's like we talked about, say, like the Cheap Tricks record, where they played just sort of like a basic set, just like a kind of a normal, we're here to play. We're going to play 40-minute set. We're going to play 10 songs and we're going to go. Or this is like, if you're to listen to this whole album today, it's got to be some of his best songs, right? And he's playing, I think it's 16 or 17 songs.
It's crazy.
16 or 17 of his best songs. Mm-hmm. And it's just him and a guitar or just him and a piano. But the crazy thing about this is that you say 5 or 6 of the songs on this album, people had never heard those songs until that tour, right? So wow. Needle and the Damage Done, a recording, it's not the recording from this album, but a recording from a previous show is actually the recording that was put onto Harvest.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was just, he had done such a great job playing that song in a live set that they just straight up put that on the album.
That's so cool.
Old Man.
Such a sad song.
Old Man, A Man Needs a Maid. What else is on Harvest? Journey from the Past, I think, right? Yeah, all just a bunch of fantastic tracks, and it's just, to me, this is quintessential Neil Young, right? Like, he's especially one of the best Canadian songwriters out there, and this is at his best. This is when he's completely nails it home. I think what's cool about it too is that it's just a cut from start to finish of his whole set, and he's got like this really witty banter, and he talks about at one point he drops his pick and he goes, "Oh, I dropped my pick." It's just like classic, like weird Neil. So yeah, I love this record. Like I said, I play it all the time, and it's been one of the most inspiring pieces of music for me. As soon as I heard this, I was like, this is it for me.
Awesome, man. A Man Needs a Maid. I don't get that song. I don't vibe with it.
I don't. That's probably one of my least favorite Neil Young songs.
Yeah, am I missing?
You know what? In Harvest, that song obviously gets a crazy production value.
Yeah,
and I
It's too much.
believe it was written. I think it's written for an opera, actually, or a play. When he wrote that, on this record, I think it's probably his most intimate song. And he just does such a great job playing on the piano. And the beauty of that song on this record is that it goes right into Heart of Gold. And he plays Heart of Gold on the piano on this album. So it's Man Needs a Maid, right into Heart of Gold Suite, and it's all on piano, and he just nails it. And so I understand, like, when A Man Needs a Maid comes on Harvest, it's sometimes hard for me to gut it, because it's so heavily produced.
Yeah.
But at live at Massey Hall, it hits you right in the feels.
I think that's spot on. It's in its production on Harvest. It's too much. It's not an enjoyable song, and it doesn't vibe with the rest of the tracks. But the way that it is on Massey Hall is actually the way it should be. And Chris, in terms of the song itself, I take it lyrically as being that he's vulnerable. Like he needs support. He needs help to get through. It's not saying he needs a maid, as in like, someone that you pay to come and. It's not. I don't take it as literally a maid, like a paid housekeeper. I take it as someone to help him because he's vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think there's a moment where he talks about the song before he plays it, and he mentions that it doesn't really mean what it says, or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I think the song got a bad rap for like chauvinistic tones, right? Because it's a man doesn't need a maid, a man needs an equal partner. And I'm sure Neil felt like that back in the day.
Yeah.
So he seemed like he's a very progressive guy, even though he sold out to Amazon. Talking about people who will sell out. But it's songwriting, right? It's sometimes hard to, maybe something vibed with him on that, at that point, but yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely.
It's hard with Neil
he
too.
mentions it.
It's hard with Neil too because his lyrics are so simple yet so often so cryptic. Like there's I don't think, unless he's said it, which I'm not sure he ever does really, unless he's explicitly said what the song is about. Often it's hard to tell. It could, you could interpret it in any number of ways. There's somewhere it's like that's about heroin or that's about poverty, but there's others like A Man Needs a Maid where you're like, well, is he saying he wants someone to do the dishes, or is he saying he's in a rough place and he needs help?
Yeah,
for sure. I like that there's a more stripped down version of on this. It's nice when you go to a live show and you hear a song that kind of like what you guys are speaking to is really heavily produced, or there's just almost too much going on in the record, and you see someone perform it with like just an acoustic guitar or piano, just very simple musician and their instrument, and they just play it to perfection.
Yeah, and he kills it. Like and Neil's a fantastic guitar player, even though he may come across as like a really basic guitarist. I think his beauty's in his simplicity, and there's hardly a fault in any note in that whole album. And obviously he plays an encore, plays a 2-song encore at the end, and people are still asking for him to stay on stage. Like it's
awesome.
Yeah.
When did you pick this up, Dan? Because this is quite a recent. And when I say recent, this was probably only released maybe 10 or 15 years ago, wasn't it?
Well, this was released in 2008, so I think it was around that time. I mean, this is when I was doing a lot of, and this kind of at the tail end of my record collecting, because like I'd mentioned in a previous episode, my record collecting was picking up 50-cent dollar fines at thrift stores when you could still do that. And then you started to notice that you couldn't find that anymore. But at the same time, I had a lot of the classic rock essentials in my collection. So, and that's really all you could find at the time. And what kills me is that I could have probably found a lot of really good jazz essentials at thrift stores.
Absolutely.
When I wasn't listening to jazz at all. And that kills me to this day because some of those are really valuable records. But this was like, okay, I want to start growing my collection to some newer stuff. And so when I would go and spend like a Saturday just going to check out 3 or 4 record stores in the city, right? And at the time, my friend he was DJing, and he was looking for a lot of hip hop stuff. And I found this record, and I was like, I have to buy it. I mean, I paid $70 back then for this record.
Wow, back then
it's a 2 LP record.
70 Canadian dollars.
70 Canadian, yeah.
Yeah, that actually doesn't sound too bad compared to today's prices. I would check. When you first brought this record up, I checked it out on eBay, and the lowest I could find it for was $110.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll be honest with you. I'd probably pay the $110.
He'll reissue it in a 10 LP box set.
It's been reissued. I mean, there's I think 2 or 3 pressings of this.
Okay.
Obviously, right? Who knows? Maybe he'll. My hopes is that he'll do like a 50th anniversary, but that already passed. I was like, it could line up perfectly with the reopening of Massey Hall.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So I was like praying that Neil Young's going to show up at Massey.
That'd be cool.
For a 50th anniversary of his performance.
Yeah, the cheapest in Australia I can find on Discogs is $150.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there mustn't be a lot out there.
Yeah.
Rumor has it Neil Young's doing another album with Crazy Horse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I heard that actually. He's getting back with Crazy Horse, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the guy's been pumping out music in the last few years, and it's been hard to gut.
Oh, really? I haven't listened.
Yeah, there's been some stuff that didn't need to be released.
Isn't that fun?
Well, I mean, the guy's been putting out records for 50 plus 60 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Like Homegrown was one where I was just like, if he thought this was shit back then, why is he releasing it now?
Yeah,
that's money. Is that the reason?
I mean, it's a rhetorical question.
But it's interesting. I don't know, even to go on a tangent, but Paul McCartney put out a new album recently, and it was okay.
It was not great.
Yeah, it was okay, but if he put it out back in the day, I wouldn't have been impressed with it. I listened to it once all the way through, and then every once in a while it comes on random, and I listen to a song, right? And
it's important to do that, though, right? It's important to give it a shot. Don't just listen to the 30 seconds on Spotify. Give it a crack, and then if you don't like it, move on with your life.
Right, which is so tough with bands you used to love, or bands like Neil Young, who had these iconic hits, and then you try to go back and listen to something new that they've released, and you're either going to love it or hate it, sort of thing.
I'm glad you had Neil as your choice, though, Dan, because when I was looking through my collection this morning, I could have easily had a Neil like Rust Never Sleeps as my choice.
Great live record.
Nice.
Yeah, today was hard.
All right.
It was hard for that.
Okay, Dan, if you had to choose most popular and your favorite, what do you got?
I think the obvious choice for most popular, but the thing is that there are so many popular songs on this album, right? Like, you've got Helpless, you've got Needle in the Damage Zone, you have Ohio, you've got Down by the River, you have Don't Let It Bring You Down, Cowgirl in the Sand, Tell Me Why.
All of these songs are playing in my head now.
I think obviously like you go with Old Man as like the most popular track.
For sure.
It's got to be probably his best and most popular. Love the studio version. You've got James Taylor on the banjo, which is like such a crazy recording. And then if I'm gonna, it's so hard. I think Love in Mind is like a deep cut on this, which people don't typically know is a Neil Young song, or they've probably never really heard the song unless they've listened to this album. But I also think the lyrics in that song are some of the best. And the thing I actually love the most about this record is Neil's piano playing. And so I'm going to go with Love in Mind as my second choice.
Nice. I always think of, whenever I hear Old Man, I always think of you playing at that corner place. Was it the Ford Art Factory?
The Ford plant.
The Ford plant.
The Ford plant on the south side of Colburn Street. I remember you playing Old Man and like belting it at the top of your lungs, like piercing my soul.
It's funny
I love that memory.
When I was playing that show, that was probably one of my first like real live shows I ever played, and I practiced the entire set, standing and like practicing the whole set list. Like I had my three or four originals that I started the set with, and I played Old Man. I think I played Skinny Love and maybe something else, but I was practicing all of this, and Old Man was never on the set list, but I was driving to Brantford for that. Old Man came on the radio, and I sang with the radio, and I was like, oh shit, I can belt that. And then I went to my friend's house where I was staying at, and I learned that song quickly that day, and then I ended up playing it at that show, and it became like, everyone wanted to hear that song when I'd play.
Awesome.
Did you play the fishing song at that set?
No, I hadn't written that song.
Oh, yeah.
Yet.
The Arkells, right?
No.
I think you had the train,
song.
I had this, the train.
Whistle Blowing?
Whistle Blowing. No, the Arkell song.
I'm one of the OG Lozier fans right here.
It's In My Dreams.
In Your Dream. Oh, okay. I couldn't remember which one.
Everyone calls it the Arkell song. Sure, yeah. It's not an Arkell song, but
rip off. Or they ripped you off? They ripped you off?
They ripped me off. And they don't sound anything like each other.
No, they don't. I can't remember the joke, but yes, I remember. Is that Ian Reed who did that one?
All right. Time to introduce our good friend Glenn. The hot take wheel.
Glenn.
The chaos engine that is the hot take wheel. If you listened last week, there was no fence sitting in last week's hot take.
Oh no.
Deep wounds were
Matt's
gouged.
still pissed.
We had a big talk after this recording. We had a big talk after the recording. We had to mend
There was
friendships.
mediation.
It was hilarious.
Okay.
All right.
Chris, what's on the wheel?
The orders changed a bit. The batteries are also dead, and when I went to the dollar store before things started opening, I wasn't allowed to buy batteries because they weren't essential. So I'm gonna spin it. I'm gonna spin this by hand. So we have number one, best singer in a band. We have best song of all time, Bon Scott or Brian Johnson. Band you can't get on board with, and the most iconic riff. So here we go. I'm gonna spin it by hand, and I'm just gonna stick my finger here, and we are on best singer in a band.
In a band.
So,
oh my goodness.
Best
in a band.
In a band? Oh,
Okay.
I did all my research on just best singers.
So we decided, this was kind of discussed before, you can pick alive or dead or both. As I'm looking at Tom, he's just going to probably break all the rules because that's what he said. If this topic came up, there are no rules. Glenn doesn't get. If you read the bio on Glenn on the website, you'll know he doesn't care about rules.
He is an agent of chaos.
So this is actually the one I was loathing. I didn't want this one to come up. This one a riff. So who wants to start us off?
Well, Chris, seeing as you're so enthusiastic about the topic, I think you should start us off.
So currently, my alive best singer that I enjoy listening to right now, there's only one that comes to mind, and I'm sure people are going to highly disagree with me, but it's Ian Thornley from Big Wreck. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's
best.
Like currently best.
Are we doing
So
best
this is
or
like
favorite?
Best. I'm going to go with, the way I picked it was best.
We're definitely doing best.
But like,
it's not favorite.
Yeah, but Ian Thornley.
Like, don't get me wrong. I like Big Wreck.
Like, there's something magic. Every album he puts out. I've recently heard a couple of people try to cover his stuff, and I didn't have appreciation until I heard people who could actually sing couldn't touch his stuff. Like, couldn't come close to hitting the notes he hits. And he's kind of, for those of you all over the world, Big Wreck's kind of a Canadian, like, kind of grungy, kind of riff rocky Canadiana band, but
they're like late
grunge. Late grunge. But then their last, like, most of their albums came out in like the late 2000s up until last year, and there's just something about his voice. I found out recently that he actually was supposed to be the lead singer of Velvet Revolver, and they liked him so much, but they refused to give him a guitar because he wanted to play his own solos and Slash wasn't having it. So they clashed in that sense. So like, don't write him off as this person who can't like belt out and sing these songs. And I'm telling you, like, you listen to some of his stuff, he has such good high and low range that I can't think of anyone right now in the music scene that I would be like, that doesn't like resonate with me in the way that Ian Thornley does.
You know what, Chris? Like, you made a great argument, and the more you talked about it, the more I'm like, you know what? I think you're onto something here.
I'm also here for references to Velvet Revolver, so I'm going to listen to them this Savo.
They're a band that you forget about, and then you go back and listen to their first album. Holy crap!
So good.
Okay.
And then I'm going to listen to Stone Temple Pilots.
I went looking for their album the other day. And so, like I said, Alive and Dead. Now I'll do my Dead one, and it's between these two. It was going to be Scott Weiland or Chris Cornell, and I knew it. I call Ian Thornley the Canadian Chris Cornell, and I am going with those are my two. My two. You can kind of tell my taste. It's like post grunge or grunge to post grunge, because Chris Cornell and Audioslave, you cannot
Seattle,
touch. Like,
man.
And Soundgarden.
And Soundgarden, far out. They had some killer albums.
You've made some compelling
There we go. So those are
there, Chris.
You've given me
those are my two. All right, gentlemen, who's up next?
Right.
Tom, take it away. Let's hear what you got.
Okay. Look, as we said, there are no rules, and I am woefully underprepared to comment on contemporary music because I don't listen to a lot of it. I'm terrible at discovering new music. I don't know why, but my record collection especially is mostly, I think I said to you guys, classic rock, heavy metal, folk music, and Australian pub rock. So instead of doing one alive, one dead, I'm going to do two dead. One male, one female. So for me, few live in the same, breathe the same air as Freddie Mercury. As a singer, as a showman, as a frontman, as a performer, as a theatrical, masterful legend that he is. I think back to that Live Aid performance, the real one, not the one in the movie.
Legendary.
And just like that vocal performance and the way that he just like grabbed, I don't know how many people were there, but he like the tens of thousands and all the viewers on the TV and just grabbed them by the scruff of the neck and was like, come with me. This is where we're going. Like
72,000, by the way.
72,000 people. And at one point, like he had them under such control. At one point, you could hear a pin drop. And then he's just like, and now we're doing this. Like one of the absolute masters. And, you know, epic voice, visionary, Yeah. So that's my male.
Yeah. It's hard to argue against that.
Thank you. And female, I had a bit of a look through my collection, and someone that you can't have on in the background, you have to stop and just admire what you are listening to. Janis Joplin.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Iconic.
Big Brother and the Holding Company, Cheap Thrills. Just a powerful, powerful record. And the soul in her voice, the power in her voice, the emotion in her voice. Like, you can't, it's not background music. You have to sit there fully engaged with it, listening to it, experiencing it, loving it.
Janis is one of those people I can't put on with when I'm doing the dishes, is because I stop what I'm doing. You're right. Like, I find myself like wandering 100%. Over to the speakers, or just like wandering aimlessly and just enjoying the song, and then I forget what I'm doing, and like the sink's overflowing or something. And yes, I agree. Right. As soon as you said female, you were including a female. I was like, please, because if you didn't, I was gonna argue that. I was gonna be like,
you're gonna shut me down.
It was coming in hot. Any arguments for that so far? Like,
that's hard to argue against. I mean,
there's no arguments.
I feel like this topic, everyone's
definitely picked two very iconic singers.
Thank you, Dan. What do you got for us? Because you're prepared so well for a singer.
Well,
in a band.
I'm gonna break the rules too, and just say, like, are we doing like another segment of the greatest singers of all time? I'm just gonna go with great singers. Okay.
Sure.
Go for it.
For me, the greatest singer who is passed away, I don't think you can beat Aretha Franklin. I think she probably has the greatest range of all time.
Yeah.
Someone who grew up a singer, right? Like singing in church and was given the lead as a child in her church, and then just growing up to be just a powerhouse musician who has inspired an insane amount of acts. I mean, she's won a ridiculous amount of Grammys. She's performed for decades, right? I some of the most iconic songs of her time, like Respect, Never Loved a Man, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman.
Bangers.
Like, those are bangers.
She might be the greatest of all time, living or dead.
Damn. Yeah.
I mean, if we want to talk about Mount Rushmore of greatest singers, you gotta. I mean, it's obviously it's hard to pick four, but like I would pick Ella or Aretha Franklin. Like I think Ella was just a little bit before Aretha's time, but Ella for the most part was singing mostly jazz standards, right? And she had the same range. But
Ella Fitzgerald,
exactly. And Aretha Franklin, she came from that Detroit scene, right? So, it was a lot more soulful. It was really generating a new kind of music. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Aretha Franklin because that's definitely hard to top. One of my favorite performances, I love Nessun Dorma. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that song. Luciano Pavarotti sings a version of that. I forget the end of the song, but it's from a really popular Italian play. But you guys should check it out, Nessun Dorma. It's one of my favorite performances. Like the Luciano Pavarotti version of it is just like it's soul crushing. He just absolutely nails it. But Aretha does a performance of that at the Grammy Awards, and it is like a cut above the rest. So definitely check that out. Okay. Singer who's still alive. Again, tough one. And this one might be a little bit more controversial, but I'm going to go with Lady Gaga.
Oh.
If you want to talk again about range.
Dude, I couldn't agree more.
If you want to talk about range, if you want to talk about songwriting, if you want to talk about performance, it's really hard to top her.
Yeah.
I think she's incredibly accomplished. She can sing any note. She can sing any style. So again, it's hard to argue against Lady Gaga in my opinion.
So I happen to.
It's a good choice.
Yeah, it is. I happen to walk by Much Music like a number of years ago during the Much Music Video Awards, and she was doing like a warm-up performance, and this was like, it was unbelievable. And I wasn't into her at the time at all. And I remember watching that, and I was just like, this is just like the pre-show. It was spectacular. And I remember going home and being like, wow, she's not just this pop star that I thought she was, right? And I was just like,
no,
awesome.
She's a brilliant musician.
She's unbelievable. She's an accomplished pianist.
Yeah.
And like I said, like the performances she puts on are like unmatched, right? Especially in this day.
I even enjoy her as an actress, which I don't say a lot about when I like about singers and actors, how they mix. But she was in American Horror Story the one season, and I was like, yep, I think she was a vampire, if I'm not mistaken. I was like, yep, she's perfect. Love it. It was awesome.
Amazing.
Dan, it's so funny you say this because, so just a heads up, I'm going to break the rules too, and she was going to be one of my picks. It's odd that you say that because I've been listening to her all day. I played her first 2 records, and I couldn't agree with you more. She's just got this raw energy, and she's got an incredible range. Every single time I hear, Speechless. Sorry, the name was escaping me for a second. That song gives me chills every single time. I've seen her 3 times live now on different tours. I've seen her for the first one she came to Toronto, when she did the Monster Ball, and then when she did the last one with Joanne. Each very different, all different experiences, because you got like the pop star, but then you got the stripped down version of Joanne, and both shows were just absolutely incredible, like totally blow you away. And she did something completely different for each. It was fantastic. I think, right now, she's up there. I would say she's on the Mount Rushmore as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's making a good case for it.
Right.
You know, if we're going to argue the Mount Rushmore of greatest singers, I think she's going to need to be accomplished for many more years before she can take a spot on that, right? Like when you talk about Aretha Franklin, it was, you know, from the 50s all the way to the 2010s, she's putting out performances, right? Whereas Lady Gaga has been around for about 20 years now, and she's been killing it at the top of her game for that long. But if she continues to put out another 3 or 4 records like she has, like her last 3 or 4 records, absolutely, man. She's incredible.
It's hard to dispute.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm going to switch if I can. I always do Lady Gaga, and then this artist comes to mind, and I'm just curious. And before, Matt, you share your last one. Amy Winehouse. What do we feel?
Yeah, I mean,
love Amy Winehouse.
Here's the thing: is like,
great singer.
Amy Winehouse came to mind as like a singer who'd passed away, because I think her very small body of work is as close to perfection as you can get, and just you can just hear the emotion of the songs in her singing, and man, even especially after I watched that documentary about her, it's just.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
I watched that.
Yeah, it's really good, and she obviously lived a very tragic life, which is really unfortunate because I think she had a lot more to give to the world. But the very small amount that she put out is incredible, and if she could have lived, you know, and performed for 30, 40 years, she could have been just as accomplished as Aretha.
Yeah, or Janice, or
exactly.
Lady Gaga, or
again,
Whitney
Houston. Janice, another one who died too early. Whitney Houston, same thing.
Well before her time.
Yeah, Whitney Houston's another one. You know, for Winehouse, there, Club of 27.
All right, Matt, what do you think?
Okay, so I'm going to break the rules too, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to agree with Tom.
Singers in a band.
So I'm the only one who followed the rule. I get it.
Yes.
Tom took Queen. Janis Joplin is her own band, but.
So I was just going to
Big Brother and the Holding Company.
So I was just going to say I'm going with Tom too, because I was going to choose Freddie Mercury as well. You can't argue that I think for bands, I think he's the greatest of all time. I can't think of another frontman that comes even remotely close.
So Freddie wins.
You guys can debate me if I'm wrong. That's fine. then I was going to go, Living Today, Gaga was going to be my choice. For male frontmen, I'm going to have to go with Matt Bellamy from Muse. Great musician, great showmanship. Vocal range is incredible. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Freddie Mercury a bit with the vocal range. Not as wide, but he's got a very good range.
Yeah.
I love what he can do on a guitar and piano too. Just every single time I see him do something, I get chills. I'm amazed. I'm like, I wish I can do that. And I'm going to go with one more that's still alive. Stevie Nicks.
Oh
yeah. There's something about her voice. Pick. Every time I hear it, I melt. She's fantastic. Her voice is just incredible. There's nothing she's put out that I haven't enjoyed.
And a great songwriter too in Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, I agree.
And always reminds me of that scene in School of Rock where they're at the dive bar and he puts Stevie on the jukebox.
Yeah.
Man, we need to make a playlist just about this conversation because I think.
Yeah, you're kidding.
I think all these.
Those are great choices, Matt.
I like how we kind of went.
Agreed.
Well, for me, I stuck to modern. I tried to do modernish, and we just
classic Chris
went down. Yeah, classic Chris, right? Yeah.
Everyone had great choices.
Yeah. So should we?
So a much less divisive hot take.
Yeah. Should we put it to a vote and see who we agree with is the greatest of?
I think we have to go with Freddie Mercury and Lady Gaga, right? Because
they got the times too.
They were picked twice.
Okay.
They were picked twice.
Yeah. So, there you go.
There it is.
So greatest living Lady Gaga, greatest no longer with us Freddie Mercury.
So I got one thing I want to ask you guys because I think it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about considering we're talking about live albums. There's obviously debates out there with certain artists and live recordings, and are they overdubbed in the studio or not, or are they actual live recordings? Two that come to mind are Blink-182's live album. The name of it is escaping me right now.
Mark Tom and Travis
Show,
right?
Yeah, that's it. And Kiss's their big live album. Those are kind of two heavily debated. Were those actually live or were they overdubbed in the studio? What's your guys' take?
Oh wow! I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard either.
Chris, you haven't heard Mark Tom and Travis Show? That's the banter.
Oh, man, it's so
banter
it's so
in
much
that
fun.
live album is amazing.
Guys, I told you I went through it's the same with the Green Day. I went through this. Any pop punk band that made it sort of famous, I ignored because I thought they sold out. I was a horrible. I was a horrible.
Stop at that.
Horrible
You're
music person.
You make these insane comments like pop punk is my absolute favorite genre of music, and you're like, I don't like Blink-182.
Yeah, but no. I like punk, but no, but that's the problem. In my youth, man, and I will be the first to admit it. I not a snob, but just chose to hate bands for no apparent reason. The Used, never listened to it. I know their one song, and I was like, garbage, threw it out. But for some reason, I love Sum 41. It's stupid, and I'll be the first to admit
You're
it. And I'm
talking
sorry.
Sum 41 sold out way more than Blink-182.
Way more. But for some reason, I chose that alliance. I'm so sorry.
Sum 41 had a great metal album recently. I might say
I gotta
recently, it's
listen to
probably
that,
the last
actually.
10
Chuck,
years.
wasn't that Chuck? That was 2000. Yeah, it was awesome. But anyway, so I'm going to step out of the conversation, and you guys finish that.
I don't know the answer, Matt, but I would think it's likely that it's not unlikely that there would be at least some overdubbing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially if you're going into it with the intention of actually selling records. I know, I can't comment on the live Kiss record. I would more confidently say that the Kiss record was overdubbed because of how great marketers they were, and they probably knew a live record would sell very well. And same with the Mark Tom and Travis Show. That was a record that they intended to sell, and they want and you could tell. I'd never seen a Blink-182 show from back then. But I know that they were wild back in those times, right?
Yeah.
Because that was before Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. And
just before it, yeah.
Just before,
it was
right?
the Enema of the State tour.
Yeah, so it was like that was like Enema.
That was like
Enema
at their
State's like,
height.
yeah, it's like a wild record. So I can imagine that they went into it like, okay, we're gonna put on our best show. We're gonna just put on our best comedy because the album is really funny.
It's hilarious. Oh my god!
But knowing that intention, and if you know that there are mistakes, and you know that there's some moments that didn't come out well in the recording, and you're gonna try to capitalize on selling the record, I'm sure they're definitely overdubbing it, which is not a big deal.
What's
in my
curious
opinion.
about it is, yeah, like so for the Blink one, they have both rhythm and lead, and I think it was just the three of them on stage. So that's why there's a little bit of controversy as to, was this actually live?
Who cares? That's a great album.
Either way, it's still so much fun. Yeah, I was going to say, at the end of the
day,
day, who gives a shit? It's still so much fun. It's hilarious to listen to. I just was curious on your guys' take. But Chris, do yourself a favor and listen to that because I think you'd enjoy it.
All right, tomorrow. I know what's up.
It's a lot of fun. It's very R-rated.
Oh yeah, don't listen to that with sensitive ears. No way.
As a 13-year-old kid, and just like learning all these words, what's
mom's away, so it's fine. Well,
they've got one song that's literally just all swear words.
Shit, piss. That
yeah,
is that it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're not going to go through the whole line because there's some.
No.
You guys got anything else? Anything else on live albums? Any final thoughts?
Can't wait to go back to a live show. It's been over 18 months. I'm starting to see a lot of things get booked. I can't get tickets to anything. Everything's selling out like crazy.
All right, so I'm the only one. I got Jeff Rosenstock tickets.
Nice.
No one, yeah. He's not big, but I'm excited. I think it got moved from the Opera House to Massey, I want to say. So that'll be exciting.
I heard he sold out. So Chris, like, you may have wasted your money. I heard he sold out recently.
It's the Danforth. Sorry, my bad. It's the Danforth Music Hall.
Great venue.
But yeah, he definitely sold out. He put out a ska album. So he did an album called No Dreams or No Dream. I can't remember. And then he literally 6 months later released the same album but ska format and just released it on vinyl.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, I hate this, but I love it. I love it. He did the checkered, literally it's the same album, but he just added this stupid ska checker. Oh, it's great. It's good stuff.
Okay, well, that sounds like that's a wrap on episode 3. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Create Expectations. We are the Groovy Guys. This has been sharing our first live album. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share on whatever platform you're listening to. If you want to see what we're listening to, you can head to our Instagram page at Create Expectations Pod. Jump onto the web at createexpectationspod.com. Or if you want to send us some hate mail, drop us a line at createexpectationspod@gmail.com. Until next time, keep digging and spinning.